So we've got 3 named storms in the Atlantic at one time. 2009, there were 3 hurricanes lined up. Now that's a coincidence, but if you go back to 1998, there were 3 hurricanes and a tropical storm at the same time.
Agenda 21 is coming soon.
For millions of years, this lake thrived. But now it is dying. Poisoned by humans who put themselves above nature. It's time to stop the killing. It's time to heal our planet. It's time to remove your footprint. Agenda 21 is coming soon.
Although Irma is a massive, huge storm, there's another one behind it. You've probably already heard about it. It's Jose. It's out in the waters at the moment, but it's about 600 odd miles away east of the Leeward Islands. Now remember, that's where Irma hit first. So it's making a similar track westwards, and it's heading towards the Leeward Islands. And as a Category 3 storm, so that's sustained winds currently of around 120 miles per hour. It could pick up more strength and it could become a higher category. But for now, it's a Category 3, and it's heading towards the Leeward Islands. So we are expecting further destruction there with further rainfall and very strong winds.
Everyone complains about the weather, but no one ever does anything about it. Well, instead of doing a rain dance, we physicists are firing trillion-watt lasers into the sky. Trillion-watt lasers into the sky to actually precipitate rain clouds and actually bring down lightning bolts. This is potentially a game changer.
But this is experimental.
It's experimental. However, in the laboratory so far it works. When you have water vapor and you have dust particles or ice crystals, you can precipitate rain. It condenses around the seeds. These seeds can also be created by laser beams. By firing trillion-watt lasers, you rip apart the electrons, creating what are called ions, and these ions act like seeds, like dust particles, bringing down rain and even lightning.
Go ahead.
Well, this fascinates me in part because, too, I remember reading the stories that China had used this during the Olympics, that the USSR had used this after Chernobyl to create rain clouds. I mean, did those really work then? We have some of these capabilities now?
Inconclusive. Even in the 60s, the CIA used this to bring down monsoons during the Vietnam War, to wash out the Viet Cong. Governments have been playing with this thing.
Alleged to.
Alleged to, right.
Yeah.
Now, we realize that for decades now, these governments have been alleged to have experimented with weather control, but nothing conclusive. This time we're bringing in the laws of physics rather than simply waving our hands and uttering mumbo jumbo. We're actually using trillion-watt lasers now. And in the laboratory, sure enough, they precipitate rain out of water vapor. Sure enough, you can actually bring down electricity down the beam.
So what does it mean for drought areas that need to have rain for crops, and if they don't have them, there's the consequences of famine?
Well, the bad news is if it's a clear blue sky, it's not going to do anything at all, because it only takes water vapor that's already in the air and condenses it. However, for floods, for agriculture, farmers, for people planning wedding parties, football games, you name it, outdoor events and agriculture and flooding and even hurricanes, all of them could be subject to weather modification.
Incredibly interesting, Professor Michio Kaku. Thank you so much.
Rain could be the biggest issue for that part of the world.
He says the models don't control the weather.
Now, the models don't control the weather,
And then he explains it's the attempt to keep up with what's going on and regenerate another projection. Why would it occur to anyone that these computer-generated models were controlling the weather? Then he says this.
Now, the storm itself has not really changed what it's doing. What has changed is our day-to-day assessment and projection. So whatever this says doesn't control the storm. Whatever this says doesn't control the storm.
So whatever this says doesn't control the storm? I have never heard a weatherman try so hard to assure his audience that his projection maps don't control the storm. With all the HARP talk, geoengineering, and weather modification, it makes you wonder why he said what he said.
I just think it's never going to happen. We can try. You know, the best we can come up with is protect our homes.
You know, they do cloud seeding. You know, when there's a drought and stuff like that, they sprinkle the stuff through the clouds. Sometimes it actually works, sometimes it doesn't.
Right, and I think that that's the case. Like, sometimes maybe it would work, and how are we going to do it?
It would just have to be gigantic, because the storm was, what, 500 miles across?
Yeah. I mean, things like that, I just think it's trouble if you try to disrupt. If you mess with Mother Nature, I mean, it's...
Yeah, but if 15 million people are between trying to disrupt and perhaps
just pushing
a Cat 5 hurricane...
I mean, listen, I think that you would have to get a NASA scientist to come in and see if that's a possibility.
It's going to be one of those things in like 100 years. Well, remember when we used to have these things called hurricanes?
Drought America's seen in decades, and it's showing no signs of letting up. Over half the country has been affected, with the brunt bearing down on the mid and southwest, especially Nebraska, Kansas, the Dakotas, and parts of the south. Just look at that. Well, in one hard-hit area of Texas, some people have grown tired of waiting for Mother Nature to bring relief and have decided to try and take matters into their own hands. Here's ABC's Juju Chang.
Craig Funky is flying me to the edge of a violent thunderstorm.
You see how nice and crisp the top of that cloud is up there?
Yeah. But the former commercial pilot isn't some adrenaline junkie courting danger. He's a cloud seeder, chasing this menacing storm to squeeze out extra rain for the drought-stricken farmland below.
As a pilot going through school, you're taught to avoid thunderstorms.
This is Craig's job, firing chemicals into the clouds in a controversial attempt to modify the weather. He's literally a rainmaker.
That dark, thick cloud over there has lots of moisture in it.
That's part of the cloud that was seeded. It actually looks heavy with rain.
Cloud seeding has been used around the world for decades, but it's now getting a closer look as farmers desperate for solutions endure their 4th month of record-shattering drought with no end in sight. It's actually the largest drought in half a century, responsible for rising food prices and record wildfires. It's even suspected to be a cause for the recent surge in cases of West Nile virus. So we came to South Texas to find out if cloud seeding can really maximize our most precious resource, or if it's just a romantic notion that doesn't hold water.
We can't manufacture a cloud. That is just absolute basic. We cannot make it rain if it was not going to rain to begin with.
Tommy Shearer is president of the Texas Weather Modification Association. He's quick to explain that he can only enhance the weather, not create it.
If you look at the cloud as a factory, we're inducing a lot of raw material into the factory so that the factory becomes more efficient.
And more productive.
Consequently more productive.
His team of pilots and meteorologists are constantly scanning the skies for the right clouds to see.
Where everybody's going to get some good rain.
After 10 bone-dry days, a promising cluster of thunderstorms is finally headed their way. Butch is today's standby pilot. He takes the first run. Up in the air, we get a bird's eye view of Butch's delicate dance.
He's just working the very edge of it.
And then Butch finds the cloud sweet spot.
Okay, he's fixing to light a flare.
Okay. Oh, I see the flare.
Yeah.
It looks like he's painting the sky.
The flares are shooting millions of silver iodide and calcium chloride particles into the cloud, where they collide with drops of water and ice and produce even more moisture. Then, usually within 20 minutes...
So what is this white smoky stuff over here?
That's rain.
Oh, that's rain?
Yeah, that's rain. All this is rain out here. Turn 7 on November, turn left base. When you go out and you seed for a few hours or all day long and really know you did some good, it's a good feeling.
The radar data collected today adds to a growing body of evidence that cloud seeding works. It can double the amount of moisture in a given cloud, and the Texas programs boast a 12% increase in annual rainfall, thanks to seeding. And long-term studies show those chemicals are environmentally safe and can't even be detected in the rainfall. But despite all the data, some of cloud seeding's biggest critics are surprisingly the very farmers who stand to benefit most.
This isn't the first drought we've been through, and it won't be the last.
Bill Slumchinsky's family has been farming this land for 5 generations. He and his son Brett tell us it's expensive to irrigate 300 acres of crops. All that watering cuts deeply into profits, but they are skeptical that anything short of divine intervention can actually make more rain.
What do you make of the cloud seeding program?
Well, when you've been in a drought since '96 and we've had one wet year, is it working?
We can't stop droughts. We can't break droughts. We just try and put a little more water on the ground.
And every drop of water, Craig explains, helps feed the underground aquifer used to irrigate crops. So though he can't promise Bill and Brett more rainy days, he's convinced cloud seeding is helping them in the long run. The local water districts that manage the aquifers believes it's working too. They pay 4 cents an acre to keep Craig and his team up and running.
We want people to understand we're not making promises we can't keep, and we're not making claims that we do not do.
Tommy Shearer brushes off critics who say he's playing God. His ideas may be bold, but he says he never loses sight of who's really in charge.
You're not going to beat Mother Nature. Let's just understand that right off. We work with Mother Nature. We try to help Mother Nature. Pick your battles. I wouldn't even fight my own mother.
For Nightline, I'm Juju Chang.
There's a lot of rain going on out there.
Rain could be the biggest issue for that part of the world.